Hey, hello again, everybody. Garrett with Loving This Land, bringing you back to the gardens. We're here in the produce garden, garden number 2, over at a friend's property 4 miles away from my parents' house over here in Kent. So we're looking at a different face of the garden now from what I showed you guys a little bit ago. Things are taking off. The hot weather crops, some of the cool weather crops have been coming out, and got a bunch going to seed that need to come out. And some things have finished their production season. The bed of strawberries here is all finished up. Some of these peas are coming to a close, and we have been replanting things. And when I say we, I mean me. I've been replanting a whole new round of peas here, and they're all starting to pop up. Decided my favorite of all these peas this year that I tried out are the Golden Sweets. They are this nice little yellow color, and they're so sweet and good. They're best picked around 3 inches or so. Very delicious. So that's what I'm replanting all my next cropping of peas with here and over at my parents' place in Renton. Moving down the first lane here, so yeah, all this red lettuce is needing to come out. We have all these jalapenos that are starting to do very nicely now that the hot weather is really taking off. We're finally over in the 80s a lot of days and getting in the 60s at night, which is good for here in Washington, Western Washington. Over in Eastern Washington at the old family property in Chelan, it's getting, upper 90s and 100. The chives are really looking good now, just taking off, really big clusters, and they won't flower this year, but they'll flower next year and continue to spread and fill out these beds as part of the goal. Just continue getting more and more perennials spreading themselves. The eggplants there are starting to look nicely again with the heat. They're a heat lover, so now with the heat they're really starting to thrive. These lemon jalapenos are really interesting looking. They have such an odd shape. If you look at that, they just have this really sort of flat, buttony sort of shape. Don't even know what to say about that, so that's kind of cool. These lipstick jalapenos again have a pretty odd shape. They're not going to get too much larger than that, but they're supposed to turn red and be extremely sweet and delicious. Normal jalapenos there, starting to put on a really good flush of flowers. And the Anaheim, that's one single Anaheim plant, and it's starting to really get large and bushy and put off lots of growth sites, so I think we'll have good production out of it later on. It has several flowers right now that are starting to turn into fruit, and I already ate one off of it that was actually surprised me a little bit. It's supposed to be a slightly milder pepper that you can stuff and whatnot, but I ate it fresh just to get it off the plant and allow it to shift back into growing more vegetation, and it surprised me. It got me a little hot. I'm not a hot fresh jalapeno eater generally, but I just use it to spice up certain dishes. The tomato rows are really starting to take off. We're starting to get lots of good fruit set all over them. Some of my most impressed this year, most of these are varieties that I've grown before, but the most impressed I am so far is with these clusters of the Brad's Atomic Grape. Let's see if we can get a clip that'll do them justice, because they just have such a interesting blend of colors. They're literally atomic looking when you get them from the right angle. Just like a metallic, shimmery sort of appearance to them. But I'm really happy with the clusters they're putting off, and they look bigger than what I've usually seen in different people's videos. So yeah, so far I'm pretty impressed with that plant. The size of the plant itself isn't gigantic so far, but that's okay. We'll get some good growth. A lot of the pear varieties have been putting off really good clusters as well. And again, I've just been, since I have such a high density of planting here, with them being literally less than a foot apart all the way down this line, I've really just been focusing on pruning them up, removing specific leaves, any lower leaves that look like they have the very beginning of blights. Hey, Malia, one of the guard dogs of the garden, such a beautiful girl. She takes care of any pest. She keeps the rabbits away from here. The groundhogs don't really mess with her once it gets hot weather. They tear it up when it's the cooler weather times when she's not guarding it. But when she is guarding it, they do not mess around. She'll literally dive and sniff and hear them out in the ground and start digging them out. And I think she's been successful before, but she keeps all sorts of things away from her. She's such a good girl. Replanted a whole bunch of beets along inside of here, and the peas over there are all starting to come to a close again. All along that line I planted out a whole new cropping that are starting to come up, getting very good germination off of what I get just cropped. Been planting out a lot more squashes, beets, and beans. So got some beets in here that I just replanted, and again just getting great clusters on the tomatoes now. Like, just look at that cluster. That's a massive cluster of flowers, and they're getting pretty well pollinated. And surprisingly, it's not a cherry variety. These are a larger variety. I forget right now, I looked it up on my chart, but these are one of the larger varieties. Yeah, lots of beets that are starting to come up everywhere. These little things. Now I'll thin them out if I need to. Hopefully not. You can let like 3 of them grow right next to each other and it'll be fine. They'll push away from each other, but this looks more like 5 or 6 of them, so I may need to thin as they grow up. The pole beans are really just taking off. Some of them are 9-10 feet tall already and just covering, starting to produce. These are the Blauhilde variety, and they make a purple bean. Let's get a look at that guy there. Yeah, a nice little purple bean, and they'll get bigger, of course, but I always pick them young and tender. And again, I've been pickling a lot of the beans, if anybody saw any of that last video, but kind of have it interspersed where I'm trellising up the beans and the cucumbers together. So this cucumber is finally starting to gain some height and spread out and put different tendrils and different shoots off the side of it to different places, so I'm happy with that. But just these thick vine clusters that are putting blossoms everywhere. And with pole beans, different than those bush beans over there, these will produce all season long. So now that they've taken off and established, I'm going to be having hard pressed keeping up with keeping the beans picked. I mean, that's going to be one of the main chores around. The only thing that keeps me having to be here every several days is to make sure the beans get picked up. And again, I'm interplanting with squash and beans and trellising up the squash to save space, because they are a space hog, a ground hog, to where they will take up a lot of square footage. So I'd rather spread some of that square footage upwards. And they're starting to set good fruits now. And these are the spaghetti squash, which I love. They make a good, not gigantic fruit, but good size fruit that I enjoy. Some different cucumbers here that are really starting to set. Boom. I think these are the lemon cucumbers. And they don't get huge. They only get maybe lemon size, literally, and they're bright yellow. So we got some different ones there, little spiky guys. They're spiky gals, actually. I guess if they're fruit, they've been pollinated. They were a female fruit, because with things like this Cucurbitaceae family plants, you have 2 different types of flowers. You have female flowers and you have male flowers. Any of the ones with these little fruits on the end, this one already lost its blossom because it got pollinated, those are female ones. But if it's a flower that doesn't have one of those little fruits, like this one here, that is a male flower. And if you want, you could literally take one of these flowers and rub it into one of the female flowers to make sure the pollen gets to the stamen of the female plant so that it can actually get pollinated and start growing. And so these ones have already been pollinated and are growing, but there's some that aren't lucky enough to get pollinated, and you'll see that it's just a little yellow fruit and they'll yank right off and won't last. So I go ahead and get rid of those so there's not any energy wasted on those. Moving along, I got just sporadic beets at random times. I pick when I want, when I feel like a beet, and I'm gonna grab this one for going on a camping trip tomorrow to the Olympic National Forest, and that's about the good sized beet I like. It's baseball sized or so. Don't need a gigantic beet. That's perfect for me. The greens are still nice and tender and delicious. I can eat those as well, and I will. Cover that soil back up so that it doesn't lose its moisture. I'll just leave that beet over here in the shade for now and grab it later before I leave. Got this cucumber plant really starting to take over this area, which is great by me, and wasn't sure if this cantaloupe would take off, but it finally is now. Replanted a section of pole beans that didn't have good germination. I probably planted them too deep originally the first time, so planted that out. No problem with timing of getting that done before. I planted those a week and a half ago, to where pole beans are generally mature in 55 days, so I'll still get several weeks of picking off of that before the season's done. These are the biggest eggplants I got, and they're a variety called White Dragon or Dragon Egg or something, and they're finally putting off their blossoms now. And something I never knew about eggplant before, they have these spikes right in the middle of a leaf, just the one. Just right there in the center of the leaf. Some of them are bigger than others, but yeah, it will get you if you're not careful, so be careful of that. These beets that some of them went to flower and I'm letting them seed out, those seeds are starting to get mature and larger and they'll dry out, and I saved a bunch last year and used them. The carrots, I've just been picking them when I need them. These are the Oxheart carrots and they're pretty tasty, and we taught Malia over there to eat them, so she's been able to come in and get a snack. That's her reward for guarding the garden. And these ones, they're just little snacker ones. They're small little, I'm going to find one I actually want to pull. Most of them aren't mature yet, or quite as mature as I'd want them to be for picking. Yeah, no, not even worth showing you. So moving along, I've replanted several hills of squash here, so I don't recall the variety of this. I believe this is a Cocozelle zucchini. So replanted bush beans all along in front of the tomatoes, so always utilize your space. That's why I'm doing a single row of tomatoes at the back and keeping them single vined and Florida weaved all along there, so that they only occupy the back space and they'll continue growing up to 7-8 feet tall, whatever, not bushing out too much. And then I got all this space in front to have all these bush beans, and I got awesome germination off of those. I was really happy. I think I literally almost got 100% germination, so that was very pleasing. These red curry squash are starting to put off fruit now as well. And finally starting to look nice. I came in and fed everything with some extra fertilizer, some fish bone meal and fish blood meal and some kelp and just natural things like that to give everything a boost. I was hoping to just have it go on the compost and a little bit of rabbit manure I added, but with everything I'm growing and some of these things that are real nitrogen hogs like the squash, I figured it'd be good to feed everything, especially the cannabis plants. They really thrive from being fed, and so I've started trellising them down and bending them so that I get a lot more growth sites that start to grow up on their own, rather than only getting, the one top stalk that gets the majority of the energy. You want to spread out that energy so that all these little branches become tops and have big top potent nugs. And so I've been branching those out, and so those will get extremely bushy. This one is already such a bush. They're not crazy tall yet, 2 to 3 feet tall each, most of them. But I'm really trying to train them more to be bushy than taller. And again, I'm not going to go into great detail with the cannabis plants just because I'm not a major expert on that. There's way bigger experts that I can start referring to you guys to in the comments. But yeah, I'm just an experimenter. I love providing my own medicine and not having to spend, and I make edible products that I love to eat as well. So way rather do that with my own stuff that I know is 100% organic. So we've been doing well with those. A lot of them are really just starting to bush out beautifully. Got some kale growing around them. That's the thing, I'm just including them in my polyculture. I'm not separating them from it and doing any other system. They're a part of everything else here. So there's literally just bok choy growing around it, going to flower and seeds so that I can collect the seeds off of that. Yeah, all these plants are looking extremely healthy now. I'm very happy with the little clones I got. They're all putting off great green growth. One of the clones I got actually has the biggest leaves. I'll show you over here, but this one is one of the ones that I bred from seed that came out of the garden from last year. There's one more as well, but this one is just starting to put off such thick growth that I'm so happy with that it came out from here, and that's something where I'll continue hopefully breeding that and be able to keep those genetics and continue building those genetics for being adapted. And again, I planted bush beans all throughout with the cannabis plants as well. And so this one, for some reason, has gone to flower way before the others, and it's just holding on to it. So it's really starting to stack up. See if we can get a look at the crystals. Come on, baby. You can do it. Well, alright. So yeah, this one of the clones actually has the largest leaves, starting to put out really nice, huge leaves. I mean, look at each of the fingers of those. And the first year I ever grew, I had the plant with the biggest leaves I've ever seen yet, and they dwarfed these, but these look like they're on track to possibly be just the same size. Some more lettuce going to seed that I'm going to save. Don't need to save all of that, but one of the nieces of the property owner here, she has guinea pigs that she can occasionally take some of the lettuce and kale to feed to them. The Swiss chard is starting to grow just these gigantic leaves. I love it. And I'm only using that for, again, making vegetable stock broth. But just the coloring on them, some of these chards, I planted a packet of rainbow chards, so there's white, pink, yellow, red. It's really beautiful. They did well. Good job, Baker Creek. Just as with all my seeds, I've gotten beautiful germination from them. I'm very pleased with Baker Creek. This is that thunderhead kale just starting to grow in its famed gigantic leaves. They'll get way bigger than this, but they're already a really good size. Same thing, just including it in the polyculture. And in front of this whole row of cannabis, I planted, or in between actually, I planted a bunch more squash, my later squash, my winter squash, and these are going to be my two different types of pumpkins that I planted out through here. Jarrahdale pumpkins, which are a blue, big, really bumpy pumpkin. They look really cool, but one of the few larger pumpkin types that maintain their extreme sweetness, so happy about that. And then some Lady Godiva pumpkins, which are famed for not having a hole on the shell, or not having a shell on the seeds, so you don't have to hull that. You just straight have the seeds that you can then eat, or why it's very beneficial for commercial production, or why it was bred for that, is to be able to use the seeds for pressing oil, if you want an easy oil option. So I went ahead and planted hills of that in between every plant. So the bush beans are on their way out, the round that was completed anyways. All these ones are done basically. They have maybe a few more beans to pick off of them, but I think they're just about done setting flowers. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But the round on the end here took a lot longer, the black turtle beans. So I have one type of bush bean that aren't done yet that I'm starting to pick a bunch off of now. And these I found, they're my only actual like straight green bean. All the others are crazy colors. These are delicious though, black turtle beans. And they're delicious. So crisp and sweet. Planted out some more squash next to them. I believe these are just zucchinis, either Cocozelle or gray zucchini or green. I don't remember each, and I did some more of those way over there as well, where I pulled the garlic out last month. Got some more gray zucchinis coming in here, starting to really put off their fruit on this plant. This plant hasn't been putting off a great amount yet, but starting to. I'm happy with it. And like I said, I planted out a whole more rounds, so we'll have lots of squash coming in. And I don't let these grow huge. I try and get them when they're bigger than this, but probably not too much. This is probably 5 or 6 inches long, and I'll probably let it get 8 or 9 and a little bit fatter. I don't think I tore off one that didn't get pollinated like I was telling you with the other. They'll just be these yellow squishy ones. You could tell they didn't get pollinated. No need to waste any energy on them. Some more beets through here. Beets, 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 and more zucchini. I plucked 2 off of this plant already, and they were delicious. Actually, I still have half of one left. These are more beets, the bull's blood beets. I'll be pulling those up probably next week. They're pretty much ready, but I already have that one beet. I don't eat beets too quickly. The greens are so vividly reddish pink on these. They're cool looking. So I'll probably continue growing that variety. So yes, my friends, the produce annual garden is thriving. It is finally on its way to abundance here. We had a slow start with the cold weather here in Western Washington, but I'm so pleased that everything is taking off. I'm gonna have squash in abundance. I've probably canned several gallons of beans